As the fire crackled and snapped, Princess Twilight and her faithful assistant Spike the Dragon were about to call it a night when one last letter arrived. Spike's stomach rumbled as he belched out the scroll sent to them by none other than Princess Celestia. Twilight took the letter and unrolled it. Her eyes had just skimmed through the first paragraph when she stopped and went very still. "What is it, Twilight?" asked Spike, looking up at his guardian. "It's nothing," said Twilight, snapping out of her shocked state. "We just received the wrong letter. That's all." "Really?" questioned Spike. "That's never happened before." "Oh well," said Twilight, rolling the scroll back up. "I'll just bring this to Celestia tomorrow." "Are you sure?" "Yes." Seeing the look her assistant gave her, she quickly added, "Look at the time! We spent the whole afternoon organizing the library again. I think it's time to call it a night, don't you?" Spike, having gone through this typical routine of organizing things before, was no stranger to Twilight and her obsession for neatness. But to hear her say that they had done enough for one day was rare, and who was he to complain about that? Taking one of his comics with him, he followed Twilight out of the library and back to their bedroom. Being able to live in a castle once again certainly took time to get used to, but the two eventually got the hang of the layout. Once back in their beds, Spike read his comic for a good while before dozing off. Twilight, however, took out the scroll again and read the rest of the letter. The first paragraph still took her by surprise. How could it be possible? After all this time, why now did this have to fall into her hoops? Celestia wasn't writing to Twilight about another friendship problem that had to be solved. Or was it about another monster from the past coming back to seek revenge? It was about Spike and his dragon parents. The Princess of Friendship read on, as every sentence filled her emotions with more questions. "As I stated last time, Twilight, one of Spike's parents has been found. I believe I have found the dragoness, and she wishes to see him. I understand that this must come as a real shock to both of you, but I need a response as soon as possible. We owe it to Spike to unite him with his real family. Your mentor and teacher, Princess Celestia." Twilight let the letter fall on her covers. What did Celestia mean by unite Spike with his real family? She and her friends, including Celestia, were his family, right? Together they helped raise him. And how could Celestia be sure that this dragoness was truly Spike's mother? She looked out the window of her room as the winter air outside whistled. This was not going to be easy, but she had to know. The next day, Twilight and Spike went up to Canterlot Castle. All the while, Twilight was sure to not make too much eye contact with her assistant. Twilight?" said Spike, poking the princess's back, as the train had already come to a complete stop minutes ago. "We're here." "Oh, sorry, Spike," said Twilight, rising from her seat. "I was thinking about something else." "I can see that," said Spike, hopping onto the young alicorn's back. "Mind telling me what's so important?" "It's about the letter from last night." "I knew it!" boomed Spike triumphantly. "I knew it was getting to you. I thought you were going crazy on me for a moment. But if you wanted to send it back, why didn't you have me do it?" "I needed to have a word with Celestia anyway, so I figured why not do both." The two entered the castle. Twilight's mind was set on one thing only. When she saw Celestia, she had a number of questions that needed to be answered. But when they opened the doors to the throne room, they didn't expect to see Applejack and Fluttershy there too. "Huh. Looks like you weren't the only one that needed to see Celestia today," said Spike, looking at the group that awaited them. Applejack and Fluttershy looked just as confused as Twilight felt. The three eyed each other, then Celestia rose and called for their attention. "Twilight, nice of you to join us. And you brought Spike along too, I see. Good. This will make things easier." The four friends exchanged looks as the Sun Princess began to pace the room. The four waited for her to speak, and at long last, she faced them. The way she carried herself made her look uncharacteristically serious. "Applejack, Fluttershy, thank you for coming as well. Now that we are all here, I have a task for you, but this time, I will be going too. Um, does this task include traveling somewhere dangerous? Asked Fluttershy. It shouldn't be, said Celestia confidently, but it could involve speaking to other creatures. Fluttershy, that's where we come in. Pardon me, Princess, said Applejack, but why not just let the three of us go? Because some creatures will be less willing to answer the Fluttershy on her own. But with me there, we should have no problems. Fluttershy gulped, but Celestia gave her a reassuring look. I have no doubt that you will be able to perform your task admirably. As for you, Applejack, your part in this adventure will be to make sure that we stay on the right path. I understand, Princess, said Applejack proudly. Navigating it is. Twilight, you already know what I want you to do, so I won't say much there. But as for you, Spike. Yes, said Spike, tensing up a little. Celestia smiled at him. Once we're there, I want you to stay with me, Fluttershy, and Applejack. Hold on. Aren't Fluttershy and I going with Twilight as well? Asked Applejack. Not this time, said Celestia, looking at her student. This is something she has to face on her own. But I have a feeling that you two will be needed afterward. She looked at Twilight again. Or perhaps before. With looks of confusion all around her, Celestia told him to wait for her outside while she went to do one last thing before they left. Twilight eyed her mentor suspiciously as she and her friends left the throne room. Staying outside was easier said than done. The temperature overnight had dropped dramatically, forcing them to wear extra layers for warmth. Fluttershy's face was barely visible behind her heavy winter hat and scarf. Celestia came outside wearing her royal armor, with a heavy brown cloak. Fluttershy squeaked, and Applejack stood up straighter than usual. She passed smaller versions of her cloak over to the four friends. The group went back to Ponyville for Applejack to tell her folks where she would be going. With the four ponies dressed in their long cloaks, they headed toward the hot air balloons since the farm pony couldn't fly. Spike, being a dragon, saw no point in him wearing anything, and lit the fire as the three young ponies piled inside the basket. Celestia hovered beside them as the balloon began to rise. With their cloaks flapping in the breeze, they set off. Celestia flew on ahead to lead the way. While her friends were discussing their theories of where Celestia was bringing them, Twilight had to speak with her teacher. She couldn't stand not knowing if what she suspected was true. She lifted herself up, making sure that her wings were spread. Spike, stay here while I have a word with Celestia. Before the dragon could respond, Twilight had lifted herself out of the basket and caught up with the older alicorn. The Sun Princess's eyes were scanning the mountains ahead. Twilight opened her mouth to speak when Celestia looked behind her and said aloud to the hot air balloon, We're almost there! She turned back and continued to face forward, but her next words were aimed at her student. You didn't tell him. Began Twilight, but Celestia cut her off. You do realize that he has a right to know. Of course, said Twilight indignantly. But, I'm sorry, but Celestia, how can you be sure that this dragoness is his mother? And why are Applejack and Fluttershy here too? I have my reasons for both, Twilight. The dragoness I spoke with was very interested in the dragon you hatched. When I told her that he was in your care, she seemed curious and eager to meet him. I think she has to see him for herself. And you have to tell Spike and your friends why we're all here. Twilight didn't know how to respond. Celestia was certain that this whole situation was genuine, but Twilight wasn't sure. She had already figured out why she needed to go into the dragon's lair alone. She had to face the dragoness herself, but she couldn't figure out why Applejack and Fluttershy were along for the ride. Spike had his reasons for being here, but something told her that Celestia had brought two of her friends with them for a reason. What that was, she had no idea.